is Radio Moscow, and here is the news. First, the headline. The Congo has decided to ask for assistance against Belgium's aggression from the Soviet Union or other countries of Asia and Africa. The Soviet Union will use every means to prevent armed intervention by the United States in Cuba. This is voiced in a communique on talks in Moscow between Prime Minister Khrushchev and Cuban Defense Minister Castro. In notes to the United States and Western Germany, the Soviet Union protests against the equipment of the West German Army with nuclear missiles, in particular Polaris rockets, America's weapon for attack. Those are the headlines. Now here is the news in detail.
The Congolese cabinet has decided to ask the Soviet Union or other countries of Asia and Africa to send troops to the Congo. Prime Minister Lumumba told a news conference that this decision was taken in view of Belgium's refusal to remove its troops in accordance with the Security Council resolution. The United Nations forces, he said, have not succeeded in getting the Belgians out of the country. Mr. Lumumba emphasized that the West is showing Belgium full support in its aggression. He said that there were no political goals in his country's request for aid. Only foreign troops will have to leave the Congo as soon as the Belgian forces are gone and order is restored. The Prime Minister said he would be needed to ask the Soviet Union for troops to the Security Council, which hopes to discuss the question tonight, does not see the Belgian get out. Top officials of the State Department called a hurried meeting to discuss the Congo's decision to invite Belgian troops to help the country against the Belgian forces. The Associated Press reports that the decision was an utter surprise for the officials in Washington. The British cabinet today discussed the Congo as a meeting of Prime Minister Macmillan's residence.
Prime Minister Chombe of Katanga province, the Congo, today repeated that he would not allow United Nations forces in his province. Mr. Chombe is backed by Belgium in a scheme to secede from the Congo. He said any attempt by United Nations forces to enter Katanga would meet armed resistance. In Brussels, meanwhile, Minister for the Congo, Walter van der Neef, has resigned. He was appointed to the post before the Congo was proclaimed independent.
All new Prime Ministers in America have expressed their people's solidarity with the Congo in an effort to Prime Minister Lumumba. He wrote, "We believe your country will be able, under your courageous and wise leadership, to overcome its difficulties and quickly restore order and stability." In Iraq, Foreign Minister Hossein Jawad announced that his country opposes any attempt to curtail the Congo's independence. Togo will send a special mission to Leopoldville to stay together with the Congolese government the question of the Congo's need for industrial express and features.
A communique issued in Moscow on talks between Prime Minister Khrushchev and visiting Cuban Defense Minister Raul Castro indicates that the Soviet Union warmly supports the Cuban people in their noble struggle. The USSR will use every means to prevent any armed intervention by the United States in Cuba. You can hear more details about Mr. Khrushchev's meeting with Major Castro after the news bulletin.
Cuban Defense Minister Raul Castro was honored by a reception at Foreign Country House in Moscow today. He told the gathering that during the 2 days he had been in the Soviet Union, he was convinced of the sincere friendship the Soviet people feel for the people of revolutionary Cuba. As long as free Cuba exists, he said, it will have sympathy and friendship for the Soviet Union.
The Soviet Women's Committee says Cuba for the Cubans. At this time, when the imperialists are increasing their provocations against the freedom-minded people of Cuba, the committee states in a public announcement it extends a hand of friendship and solidarity to Cuban women who are building a new life alongside their fathers, husbands, and brothers. We Soviet women, the statement says, give you wholehearted support and declare with you that Cuba must be for the Cubans.
The Soviet government has sent a note to the government of the United States in connection with the policy of arming West Germany with atomic and rocket weapons. From the statement made by Secretary of the American Army Butler and elsewhere, it's clear that the United States intends to supply the West German Bundeswehr with missiles of the Polaris type. These missiles can be armed with an atomic warhead and are designed for aggressive purposes. The Soviet government gravely warns the government of the United States that the path it's taking has fraught with dangerous consequences for world peace. The responsibility for these consequences will fall heavily on the shoulders of the American government. The government of the USSR, says the note in Congo, will be forced to take retaliatory measures which, if deemed necessary, will guarantee the security of the Soviet Union and its allied countries, and to provide peace in Europe and the whole world.
The Soviet Union has warned Western Germany in a note on the consequences of rearmament and the acquisition of nuclear weapons, in particular American Polaris missiles. The note points out that these actions by Western Germany grossly contradict Germany's obligations under the unconditional stipulations ending the Second World War. They directly menace the security of all the nations of Europe. The Soviet Union also warns that Western Germany will bear full responsibility for any retaliatory measures its actions may provoke.
The Japanese Supreme Court has annulled a decision by a lower court proposing as unconstitutional any restrictions on rallies and demonstrations. This is another move in the campaign to smash popular resistance to the reactionary policy of the government. A last meeting immediately protested in Tokyo. The Socialist Party declared that the Supreme Court decision undermines the fundamental rights guaranteed by the Constitution.
The town council in Fukuoka, Japan, today has insisted that the American command at the Ipatsuka Air Base stop flights from their base by RB-47 spy bombers. The American authorities replied that the planes had only landed there to refuel.
Guatemala has proclaimed a state of emergency for 30 days on the pretext of disorders headed by the government to be provoked by communists. All constitutional rights have been suspended and assembly prohibited. All political activity has been announced temporarily banned. The government has taken control of radio stations and will intervene for censorship.
President Nasser of the United Arab Republic has issued decrees on a 10-year plan for economic development. Under the plan, the Nasser-led combine 1964 and 65 is to increase 40% over this year.
A study delegation has gone to Havana, Cuba, as guest at the first Latin American Youth Congress. The Soviet group will also join international voluntary work camps being organized in Cuba.
The Soviet government and Communist Party have congratulated the Baltic Republic of Estonia on the 20th anniversary of Soviet rule there. The message wishes the people of Estonia new successes in advancing industry, farming, science, and culture, improving their well-being, and building a communist society.
A new helicopter service was opened in Moscow today with just people to the International Serenitsova Airfield in 12 minutes. A bus trip takes nearly an hour. 1-seater helicopters will make 12 round trips a day. Another helicopter service, scheduled to open shortly, will connect the center of Moscow with the National Achievement Exhibition in its northern suburbs. There will also be pleasure cruisers to picturesque spots around Moscow.
The temperature in Moscow dropped a few degrees down to 86, and it's a great relief after the spell of 90 and 91 that we've been having for the past week and a half. The rain we had yesterday must have helped, even though it did dry up completely a half hour after it fell. It's hard to say where most of the people are seeking coolness, at home or out in the open. It's sultry even in the evening.
And now to conclude this bulletin of news, here are the headlines once again. The Congo has decided to ask for assistance against Belgian aggression from the Soviet Union or other countries of Asia and Africa. The Soviet Union will use every means to prevent armed intervention by the United States in Cuba. This is voiced in a communique on talks in Moscow between Prime Minister Khrushchev and Cuban Defense Minister Castro. In notes to the United States and Western Germany, the Soviet Union protests against the equipment of the West German army with nuclear missiles, in particular Polaris rockets, America's weapons for attack. This is Radio Moscow.
During his stay in the Soviet Union, Cuban Defense Minister Raul Castro met with Prime Minister Khrushchev for an exchange of opinions on Cuban-Soviet relations and other international problems of the day. He followed a summary of a communique they issued on their talk. On behalf of the Cuban government and the Prime Minister, Major Castro warmly thanked the Soviet government for the great political and moral support it was rendering the people of Cuba. The Cuban people, he said, will never forget the Soviet Union's assistance. It will go down in history both in our country and in all the other Latin American nations. During the exchange of opinions on the international situation resulting from the affairs in Cuba, it was stressed that certain quarters in the United States have not relinquished their plans for an armed invasion of Cuba, and that constant threats are being voiced to smother Cuba's liberty and independence by force. Therefore, the communique continues, all nations, primarily in Latin America, must maintain constant vigilance in order not to allow any bandit aggression towards Cuba. Prime Minister Khrushchev expressed certainty that the Latin American government must heed the firm will of their people and not join the shady schemes of the American corporations and militarists against Cuba. It was stressed that the Cuban Revolution and the cause of peace, liberty, and independence which the Cuban people are supporting is the common cause of all nations which are defending their independence and the chance to decide their own destiny. The firm conviction was expressed that all nations will support Cuba and will help it break the economic blockade. The socialist world is strong enough now, and its economic might is sufficient to fully ensure Cuba, through normal trade relations, all the commodities it needs, which the United States and certain other capitalist countries are now refusing it. Mr. Khrushchev said that the Soviet government was ready to undertake deliveries of oil and other items in quantities sufficient to satisfy Cuba's demands in exchange for Cuban goods. On behalf of the Soviet people and their government, Mr. Khrushchev supported the Cuban people in their noble fight. He confirmed that the Soviet Union would use every means not to allow any armed intervention by the United States in Cuba. Major Castro extended Mr. Khrushchev an invitation on behalf of the Cuban government and Prime Minister Castro to make an official visit to Cuba. Mr. Khrushchev accepted with gratitude. He repeated an earlier invitation to Dr. Castro to visit the Soviet Union. In conclusion, Mr. Khrushchev said Cuba's just cause will win and that the Cuban people will surely reinforce their gains for the sake of peace and friendship among the nations of the Western Hemisphere and of the rest of the world. The exchange of opinions between Prime Minister Khrushchev and Defense Minister Castro proceeded in an atmosphere of complete understanding and sincere friendship. First Deputy Prime Minister Nikoyan took part in the talk. That is a summary of a communique issued in Moscow on talks between Soviet Prime Minister Khrushchev and Cuban Defense Minister Raul Castro. This is Radio Moscow.